My name is Lucas Brandt, but that never seemed to matter much where it counted. No. On paper, I had credentials, field certifications, OSHA compliance awards. My name was on countless permits, inspection forms, blueprints, contracts. But on site, in the heartbeat of CarWorks construction, I was always just Franklin's son-in-law. That's how the crew referred to me. How vendors smirked when they saw me negotiating change orders. How clients glanced over me at ribbon cuttings. Not Lucas, not Mr. Brandt, just that guy Shelby's sister married. Android Shelby. God, Shelby couldn't tell a grade beam from a grout bag if it were printed on his Palm Springs golf towel. Still, I kept my head down. I believed in the grind. I told myself if I just kept showing up, kept doing the hard things no one wanted to do, checking rebar at 4 a.m., smoothing disputes between plumbers and sparkies, hauling myself to City Hall to push through a delayed permit, someone would notice. Maybe not Franklin, but the work would speak. For 15 years, I was the guy who always showed up. I trained half the crew, taught rookies how to respect the build, not just chase the paycheck. When things went south on a site, weather delays, shipment errors, inspections that made project managers sweat, it was my number they called. My name wasn't on the trucks, but it might as well have been in the mud holding the wheels steady. Still, every company barbecue, every staff meeting, every award cars picked up, it was Franklin up front shaking hands while I stood in the back holding the folding chairs. Even the company website listed me under Field Liaison, a vague title that meant I did everything important. While Shelby posted selfies from executive seminars, I told myself it didn't matter. That I was building legacy, not headlines. That maybe one day when Franklin was ready to retire, he'd look over his shoulder and realize the guy who stuck around, who helped him survive 2 recessions, labor shortages, and regulatory nightmares. Maybe that guy deserved more than a pat on the back and a reserve parking spot. I was wrong. That Monday morning, the sky was a concrete gray, thick with humidity and the threat of rain. I'd been on the Riverview Bridge site since before sunrise, checking overnight erosion reports, talking with the soil engineer about unexpected groundwater patterns. My boots were caked in mud, jeans damp from the waist down. I pulled into CarWorks HQ with my truck still vibrating from the gravel road. The parking lot was full, too full. I saw Tanya's car, Miguel's pickup, even a couple of city inspection vehicles. That wasn't normal. Inside, the warehouse was buzzing. 40 staff members packed the space, standing shoulder to shoulder near the foreman's table. Franklin stood front and center, clipboard in hand, eyes like marbles. Shelby was next to him, wearing slacks too new for construction, and a smug expression that had clearly been practiced in the mirror. I weaved through the crowd quietly, nodding at Miguel, who gave me a look, uneasy, confused. The room silenced when Franklin cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming in early," he began. "As you know, we've been making plans for long-term leadership transitions here at CarWorks." My stomach tightened. Transitions? This wasn't a word Franklin used casually. My heart pounded, but I said nothing. "I'd like to formally announce that effective immediately, Shelby Carr will take over as president and CEO of CarWorks Construction." The words didn't register at first, not fully. They felt like lines from a dream I didn't want to remember. Then he added, without even turning to me, "Lucas will handle administrative operations moving forward. He'll assist Shelby during the transition." It was like someone poured cement into my chest. My breath stilled. My fingers went numb. Miguel's head turned slowly toward me, his brow furrowed. Tanya shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable. Even the junior project coordinators glanced around like someone had just dropped a live wire between us. Administrative operations. After 15 years of fieldwork, of bleeding into this company, I was being handed a desk, a chair, a windowless office, and a title that meant stay out of Shelby's way. I wasn't even looking at Franklin anymore. I was staring at Shelby, who grinned like he'd just been handed the keys to a sports car he didn't know how to drive. He clapped Franklin on the back, nodded at the room, and said, "We'll be making some exciting upgrades soon." Upgrades. It took everything in me not to walk out right then and there. But I didn't. Not yet. I clenched my jaw and stood still, arms crossed over my chest, heart pounding against the betrayal. Franklin didn't even look at me when the crowd began to break up. He turned to Shelby and started discussing expansion projects like I was invisible. Like I hadn't just had a decade and a half carved out of my soul in front of my own team. I walked out of the warehouse that day without a word. Not to Franklin, not to Shelby. Not even to Miguel, who tried to catch my arm but stopped short when he saw the look in my eyes. I got in my truck and sat behind the wheel for a long time staring at the dashboard. The keys were in my hand, but I wasn't driving yet. My whole life had been this company. And now I was just a ghost with a job title. A man whose work was remembered, but whose name was never known. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Mud on my face, eyes like storm clouds. For 15 years, I answered to a name that wasn't mine. But that ended today. The next morning, the sun rose like it had no idea what had been stolen from me the day before. I arrived at CarWorks earlier than usual, though I couldn't say why. Habit maybe. Loyalty still kicking like a dying engine. The warehouse was already buzzing, voices echoing, clipboards slapping against palms, forklifts groaning with morning weight. I walked past the whiteboard where Miguel usually scribbled shift rotations and site assignments. Today, it was empty, wiped clean, like someone had decided the rules had changed overnight. Maybe they had. I stepped inside the building just as Franklin's voice boomed across the warehouse floor. Everyone to the loading bay. Now, I didn't need to be told twice. 40 employees gathered, engineers, laborers, admin staff, foremen, all crammed together under the same ceiling beams I helped design during the expansion 7 years ago. I knew those faces. I'd laughed with them, covered shifts for them, driven some of them home in my own truck when their cars broke down. And now I stood among them, not as a leader, not as a mentor, but as a placeholder, Lucas Brandt, the man demoted without ceremony. Franklin stood front and center again, Shelby to his right in a pale blue shirt, too crisp for a man who'd never set foot on a job site before college. Shelby looked around like he was sizing up his new kingdom. He didn't know these men and women. Didn't know the bruises under their sleeves, the injuries, the exhaustion, the inside jokes that got us through late nights and overworked Saturdays. But he was smiling like he did. Franklin cleared his throat and repeated it just in case any of us missed it the first time yesterday. Shelby Carr is now president and CEO of CarWorks Construction. There was a pause, just a breath of silence. Maybe it was respect. Maybe confusion. Maybe everyone was waiting for the punchline, but no one laughed. Franklin went on, Lucas Brandt will move to administrative operations, primarily supporting Shelby as he transitions into leadership. I didn't flinch, not even as Franklin finally turned toward me like he was daring me to speak, to challenge him, to say something that would make this a scene. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't even nod. I just stood there, back straight, hands calloused and stained from a 5 a.m. foundation inspection out in Oakage. While Shelby slept in and Franklin rehearsed Betrayal in the mirror, I was out there with concrete beneath my boots and dew on my jacket, making sure their deadlines wouldn't collapse. The silence that followed Franklin's words felt heavier than steel. Miguel shifted his stance beside me. I could feel the question radiating off him, his brow furrowed, jaw tight. He wasn't the only one. Tanya looked stunned. Evan, one of the new hires I had personally walked through his first drywall layout, blinked at me with something between pity and disbelief. Even the junior project staff, those fresh from school, still learning the difference between design and reality, had their eyes flickered toward me, then away like they were ashamed on my behalf. But I said nothing. Not yet. Franklin kept talking something about the future, growth plans, digital integration, buzzwords that didn't mean anything without the foundation to back them up. Shelby nodded along like a bobblehead, pretending he understood. The kind of nod you give when you read a sentence twice and still don't know what it means, but you want to look smart. That's all he ever did. Look smart. Play boss. Flash smiles while others bled. When the meeting finally dissolved, I walked away before anyone could ask questions. Miguel caught up to me outside near the fleet trucks. "You good, Chief?" he asked, quiet but direct. I nodded once. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine," he said. "You look like you're holding a blueprint made of TNT." That made me almost smile, but not quite. "You think I should have said something in there?" Miguel crossed his arms and looked at me for a long time. "No," he said, "but I think you will when it counts." I left him there, headed toward the main building. Shelby's office, formerly Franklin's, was already renamed on the frosted glass. Carr President. The ink was barely dry on the printout taped over the old sign. I knocked once, then walked in. Shelby was behind the desk, fumbling with his email like a kid trying to program a VCR. He looked up startled like he forgot I existed. "Oh, hey. Didn't think you'd swing by." "I'm still on payroll," I said. "For now," he laughed nervously. Right. Well, I guess I owe you a thank you for everything you've done." "You don't owe me a thank you," I said. "You owe the company 15 years of experience you don't have." His face flushed. "Look, I know this is weird, but Dad thought it was time. And I mean, I did get my MBA and I got my hands dirty." I replied, "There's a difference." He stood suddenly defensive. "I'm not trying to take your place, Lucas. I just want to bring new energy, you know. A fresh vision." "You can't bring vision to a job you've never seen from the ground," I said. His smile slipped. What do you want me to say? Nothing, I replied. That's the thing, Shelby. I don't want you to say anything. I just wanted to look you in the eye and let you know that I see exactly what's happening. You weren't handed this because you earned it. You were handed it because of your last name. Shelby opened his mouth, but I was already halfway out the door. Back at my desk, well, the desk that was now somehow less mine than it was before, I sat down and stared at my phone. I thought about calling Isla, telling her everything, asking her if she knew, but I didn't want her voice. Not yet. Not when I wasn't sure if she'd stand with me or behind her father. So, I sat there in the quiet, staring at a screen full of digital site maps and half-written RFIs. I thought about the bridges I'd helped build, the buildings that now touch skylines, the crews that still use the techniques I taught them, the relationships I'd forged over 15 years, and I thought about the title I was now expected to accept like a consolation prize. I didn't speak that day, but inside something was already moving. A shift beneath the surface. The kind you don't see right away, but eventually brings the whole structure down. Because silence, when you've been ignored too long, isn't weakness, it's a fuse, and mine had just been lit. Shelby strutted into the main office the next morning like he'd been building car works since birth. You could practically smell the cologne and entitlement before he stepped through the door. Button-down shirt with too much starch, hair too slick, and a tablet in one hand that he barely looked at. He wasn't carrying tools or permit folders or a rolled blueprint like the rest of us did every day. No, just that damn tablet and a face full of borrowed confidence. He strolled through the hallway like he owned it, passing the project coordinator desk where Rebecca sat, sorting site schedules. She raised an eyebrow as he passed, but didn't say a word. We had all learned early on that calling attention to Shelby's incompetence was like kicking a skunk. You might win, but you'd stink for weeks. He didn't greet anyone. Not Miguel, not Tanya, not even the receptionist, Paula, who'd been there since CarWorks was still running jobs out of a one-room trailer. He walked straight into Franklin's old office, now as like the king had returned from some glorious campaign. 10 minutes later, he summoned us to the conference room with a group chat message sent from his new company email. All department leads, brief alignment session in 15 minutes. Alignment session, I muttered to myself, staring at the message on my phone. This wasn't a startup. It wasn't a marketing firm with beanbag chairs and ping-pong tables. We were a construction company. We didn't align. We showed up and made sure things didn't collapse. Still, I went. Miguel gave me a side glance on the way in, whispering under his breath, "Let's see what Prince Concrete has in store today." I took my usual spot near the corner of the long oak table. Rebecca was beside me, arms folded. Miguel sat across, one foot tapping against the tile. Tanya arrived late, her hard head still under her arm. Shelby waited until everyone was seated before tapping his tablet and clearing his throat like he'd been practicing the speech since breakfast. So, he began pacing slowly. We're entering a new phase of CarWorks. A smarter phase. He smiled like that alone deserved applause. I've been reviewing our Q3 numbers and I think we've been approaching project delivery with an outdated mindset. It's time we start optimizing vertical integrations and outsourcing project flow to increase scalability. Miguel blinked. Come again? Shelby nodded as if he'd been asked to elaborate. Basically, we need to run CarWorks like a real business. Not just a bunch of guys with tape measures. A muscle in my jaw twitched. This bunch of guys had built a dozen commercial projects in the past year alone. Schools, fire stations, 3 high-rise shells, and an eco-hub that had just won an award from the city. But he continued, undeterred, we'll start by shifting procurement to a third-party vendor platform. More efficient, less human error. And as for on-site operations, I'm looking into bringing in an offshore remote management team to handle scheduling and logistics. There's no reason we can't automate most of this. Rebecca leaned toward me. He's trying to optimize us out of the job. Shelby pointed to a slide on the flat screen, a mock-up of a new organizational chart. He was at the top, of course. Below him, unfamiliar names and roles: project logistics manager, vendor coordination analyst, AI job site evaluator. I had to squint to find my own name, tucked in a box labeled support liaison. That was the final push. I straightened in my seat. Shelby turned to me. Lucas, we'll need you to train the new teams on how we've been doing things, but make sure they understand we're pivoting away from the old models. You'll be the bridge, you know. A hush fell over the room. I could feel everyone watching me. Miguel holding his breath. Rebecca half smiling like she knew a storm was coming. Shelby stood there still smiling like a boy who thought he'd won a chess match with 2 pawns and a prayer. I looked at Franklin. He wasn't there. Of course, he wasn't. He'd done his part. He handed the keys to his son, stepped back, and let the rest of us sort through the wreckage. I looked back at Shelby, that smug, eager face waiting for my obedience. I smiled calm, slow, the kind of smile people mistake for agreement before they realize it's actually a trigger. No, I said. Shell's brow dipped. No, what? No, I'm not going to train Shelby. I'm not going to be your bridge. I'm here to resign. The words dropped like a steel beam onto concrete. Silence shattered across the table. Shelby's face froze in confusion. Rebecca covered her mouth. Miguel blinked. Tanya sat up straight, whispering, "Holy shit," under her breath. Shelby laughed once, nervous. "You're not serious." I leaned back in my chair. 15 years of loyalty, 15 years of early mornings, busted knuckles, missed holidays, and bridges that won awards I never got credit for. And you hand the company to your son because he read a few business books. Yeah, I'm serious. Shelby looked like he'd been slapped with a blueprint, but Dad said it. Your dad gave me a job. I gave him stability, clients, growth. I gave him a company that didn't fold when the market tanked in 2010 and 2020. I gave him 15 years, and I'm not giving him one more day. Shelby opened his mouth to protest, but I was already standing. I don't owe this company another second, I said. Especially not when it's being handed off to someone who thinks concrete is a suggestion and not a science. Miguel stood too. Lucas. I looked at him. I'm good, Miguel. I'm just done. I left the room, the stunned silence still sitting heavy behind me. I walked down the hallway, past the frame project photos on the walls, half of which I personally delivered. I went to my desk, grabbed a few personal items I kept there. A photo of Isla and me from our 5th anniversary, a brass measuring scale from my mentor Rick, who passed away 3 years ago, and a small leather notebook where I'd sketched solutions that saved projects more times than I could count. As I was walking out, Franklin was coming in through the front doors, phone in hand, deep in conversation. He looked up and saw me. Lucas, he said, smiling faintly like he hadn't just let his son cut the legs out from under me. Big day, huh? Shelby's got vision. He's got words, I said. Not vision. Franklin smiled dimmed. You're not making this easy. I nodded. It was never supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be fair. He sighed. You're too emotional about this. No, I said, I'm just done being invisible. You should have known what would happen the moment you asked me to train the guy who's never lifted a beam. Franklin stepped aside, but didn't stop me. Maybe a part of him knew this was always how it would end. He just didn't expect it to be today. He didn't expect me to walk away without pleading, without yelling, without trying to bargain my value back. But that's the thing about people like Franklin and Shelby. They only notice loyalty when it's no longer theirs. Outside, the sun was high, the air thick. I sat in my truck with the engine off for a long while, just breathing. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from release. From the kind of relief that comes when you finally set down the weight no one ever acknowledged you were carrying. I didn't know what I'd do next. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever I built from here on out would have my name on it. Not Franklin's, not Shelby's, mine. Because when the hammer finally drops, it doesn't care about your last name. It cares about Wed, slamming his palm against the desk that I had practically built with my own sweat. The old man's face was flushed to deep red. Eyes narrowing like I was some entitled intern who didn't know the cost of a beam or the difference between pressure-treated and composite decking. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. No, I said, standing tall on legs that didn't tremble. You gave me a job. I gave you 15 years of stability. Clients who stayed because they trusted me. Growth because I pushed when the rest of the industry pulled back. I was the structure beneath your facade. Franklin's breath came in hard puffs like he just realized the foundation under his empire had cracked and I wasn't going to patch it anymore. His hands trembled. The whether from age or fury I couldn't tell. His lips parted like he had more to say, but all that came out was a muttered scoff as Shelby strolled in like a toddler who wandered into the wrong room at a family reunion. What's the big deal? Shelby asked, his voice light and condescending, brushing invisible lint off his shirt cuff. You're still here, right? It's not like we fired you. That tone, that smug, clueless tone. That's when the last nail went in for me. Not the demotion, not the betrayal, not even Franklin's pathetic speech about loyalty. It was Shelby's inability to see the insult and what they'd done. The casual dismissal of my contribution like it was coffee fetching or inbox sorting. My silence wasn't resignation. It was clarity. I looked Shelby in the eye and he flinched just a little. You're not worth explaining it to, I said, then turned toward the coat hook and grabbed my work jacket, the one with the Carworks patch sewn onto the chest. I peeled it off slowly, letting the stitching tar just slightly, then folded the jacket and set it neatly on the desk. Tell your vertical integration team, I won't be around for the rollout. I left them standing in silence. Let them talk to each other in buzzwords and blind spots. My feet took me down the familiar hallway where the walls were lined with glossy framed photos of job sites I managed. Buildings I'd guided from concept to concrete. Of course, none of the plaques had my name. Just cars. Always Carwex. When I reached my office, well, the room they called mine, I didn't waste time. I grabbed my notebooks, the engraved calipers gifted to me by a client 5 years ago, a few personal binders, and the wooden model of a suspension bridge I built during my first year with the company. The rest could rot in that drawer. I wasn't coming back for it. Just as I was zipping my bag, I heard a knock and turned to see Rebecca Lynn standing in the doorway, clipboard in hand, brow furrowed. Her eyes flickered between the cleared shelves and my expression. "You're really doing this?" she said quietly. "I've already done it," I replied. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. For a moment, she said nothing. "Just watch me." Rebecca wasn't the kind to waste words. Efficient, sharp. Her reports were always perfect, her deadlines always met. I'd relied on her more times than I could count, especially when Shelby started helping with logistics. "Lucas," she said slowly, her voice steady. "Are you done with this company or are you done with construction?" I met her eyes, hearing the difference in the question. I looked down at the resignation letter still sitting on my desk and signed but already decided. My fingers tapped it once. "Depends who's asking." She smiled at that just barely and nodded. "There's going to be fallout," she said. "Everyone's pretending like Shelby knows what he's doing, but the bids are already slipping. The logistics calendar's 2 days off. Miguel's boiling. Tanya looks like she's ready to walk. That's not my fire anymore." I said, "Let them learn how fast a job site burns when the wrong person's holding the lighter." Rebecca studied me again. Then after a pause, she said, "If you ever decide you're not done with construction, some of us would follow." It was a simple sentence, but it hit harder than Franklin's shouting or Shelby's smirk. Some of us would follow. Not because I was their boss. Not because my name carried weight, but because of the way I worked, the way I led, the way I stood on rebar-strewn ground beside them, rain in my face, clipboard in hand, solving real problems in real time without hiding behind titles. I nodded. "I'll keep that in mind." She left without another word. I sat down for a moment, letting the room settle around me. This place, this office, this company, I had poured years into it. I'd sacrificed evenings, weekends, holidays. I missed my own 10th anniversary dinner with Isla to finish an emergency permit for a municipal project that Franklin later credited Shelby for. I showed up when it was dark and left when it was darker. And yet, it had never truly been mine. Now it was someone else's mess to clean. I left the building without saying goodbye. I didn't need to. The ones who mattered would understand in time. I drove home slowly, my hands loose on the steering wheel. The sky was low and gray, threatening ray. Somehow fitting. When I walked into the house, Isla was in the kitchen slicing peaches. She didn't turn around right away. "You're home early," she said softly. "I quit," I replied. She set the knife down and turned to me, eyes wide but unreadable. No gasp, no flood of questions, just a long quiet pause. "You knew," I said. She didn't deny it. "Dad told me it was happening." I didn't know exactly how, but I knew. Her honesty didn't hurt more than the betrayal. It hurt in a different way, a deeper one. She had known and said nothing. She hadn't warned me, hadn't prepared me, hadn't fought for me. I nodded slowly. "Right, Lucas?" I raised a hand. "Don't. Not now." She stepped toward me, then stopped, unsure. "I gave your family everything," I said. "And I never asked for a spotlight. Just respect. Just a place at the table I helped build. But I was always the son-in-law, never the man." She looked down, ashamed. Maybe too late. I walked past her into the living room, dropped my bag on the couch, and sank into the nearest chair. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be, no schedule to chase, no emails to answer, no name badge to wear, just a man with no last name that mattered to anyone but himself. And somehow that felt like the first solid ground I'd touched in years. Miguel left 2 days after I did. He didn't throw a fit, didn't slam any doors, just walked off site during a break, handed in his badge, and never came back. Tanya followed a few hours later. I heard about it through the grapevine first, then confirmed it when Rebecca texted me a single line. "2 more gone. They're watching you." Word had started to spread quietly at first, like a whisper carried on steel beams and coffee mocks. Lucas Brand had walked, not stormed out, not burned the place down, just walked. And in this industry, when someone who built a company leaves without drama, people pay attention because they know it's not emotion, it's math. People like me don't leave unless we've already added up the cost. I didn't gloat. There was nothing to gloat over. I didn't want Car Works to fail, even if it was falling apart like a half-poured foundation. What I wanted was truth. And now that I was gone, it was surfacing fast. Project managers were calling me privately. Subcontractors were checking in, pretending it was small talk. Even old vendors I hadn't worked with in years were asking if the rumors were true. Had I really left? Was Shelby in charge now? Did I have something else in the works? At first, I said no. Just living, just figuring it out. But the more I heard about how Shelby was running things, cutting corners, missing bid deadlines, hiring lowball contractors, the more I realized the people reaching out weren't just curious. They were looking for a way out, too. One afternoon, I was at the hardware store picking up some lumber for a backyard pergola I'd been planning to build for over a year, but never had time to touch. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Same number. On the third ring, I answered. Lucas Brandt, the voice asked. Familiar, crisp, but I couldn't place it right away. Speaking. It's Marshall Vane. I stopped walking. Marshall Vane was the kind of client that made or broke companies. Owner of VN Properties, developer of over 30 mid-tier office parks and commercial strips across the state. We'd worked with him on 2 projects in the past, challenging ones, and he'd always appreciated how I handled chaos without complaint. I heard you left Car Works, he said. That true? It is. I'm surprised they let you go. They didn't let me go. They replaced me. A pause, then a small chuckle. Well, that explains it. I gave them a shot at our new Auburn Gateway site. They pitched me a dream, but everything since then has been excuses. Missed specs, terrible communication. They sent me a bid package that looked like a college group project. I'm not surprised, I said. What are you doing now? Building a pergola, I said dryly. He laughed. Well, if you ever start your own thing, something with your name on the trucks, call me first. I'm interested. He hung up before I could respond. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from worry, but from adrenaline. The kind of electricity that runs through your veins when the next move finally clicks into place. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise and then did what I hadn't done in over a decade. I sketched. Not a pergola, not a bridge, a business. I made calls, quiet ones. Rebecca met me for coffee that afternoon. She didn't ask what I wanted. She already knew. When I said the words, I'm thinking of starting my own outfit, she nodded like she'd been waiting for it. I'm in, she said. As long as I don't have to sit under fluorescent lights all day again. Next was Miguel. I met him at the old diner off Route 9. We used to eat there during site checks. He brought 2 of his best crew guys with him. One of them, Ray, was a wizard with grading. The other, Nico, didn't talk much, but had a reputation for never missing a finished date. You sure you're not just pissed at Franklin? Miguel asked between sips of burnt coffee. I was, I said. Now I'm just ready, he smiled. Then let's get to work. We needed an engineer. I called Tanya. She didn't hesitate. About damn time, she said. I've been getting dumber listening to Shelby try to explain modular framing principles to me like I didn't go to school for this. Rebecca helped secure the paperwork. I leased a double-wide trailer on a patch of commercial dirt a mile outside the city. No sign, no paint, just enough space for a table, a printer, and a mission. We called it Brandt Build Construction. Simple, honest, no frills. My name, my work, and nothing I didn't earn. Royce, the accountant from Car Works, called me one evening from his personal number. I know it's a risk, he said, but I'm tired of balancing books for people who think Excel formulas are a strategy. If you're serious, I'll come with. I'm serious. In less than 2 weeks, we had a skeleton crew. No investors, no marketing firm, no fake buzzwords, just people who knew what they were doing, ready to work with someone who actually respected what they brought to the table. Then Marshall called again. I've got $1 million office park breaking ground next month. Car Works blew the pre-con. You want it. I don't have a full fleet, I admitted. No branding, no firm reputation yet. I don't care about logos. I care about delivery. I care about not having to check every email twice to make sure someone didn't miss a code requirement. I exhaled. I'll take it. You'll need bonding. He said, I'll figure it out. And fast. That night, Isla came home to find me surrounded by paperwork, old plans, cost estimate templates, contractor forms. She stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. "You're starting your own company." "I am." She stepped inside. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear it." She sat across from me. "I know my father hurt you, but if this is your way of getting back at him." "It's not," I said. "This is about doing it right." For once, her face softened. "Then build it. Just make sure you're building for the right reasons." I didn't respond. I just nodded because she was right. I wasn't in this to compete with Franklin or to bury Shelby. I was in this to reclaim what they never gave me: credit, control, and the dignity of doing things the way they should be done. As I stared at the blank company letterhead I printed minutes ago, I picked up a pen, paused, then wrote the first words that would define the next chapter of my life. Brandt Build Construction, founder and principal, Lucas Brandt. And beneath it, like a blueprint finally coming to life, I scrolled the words I lived by. Measure twice, build once, lead always. I made the call to Marshall the next morning, my thumb hovering over the screen for a full minute before I tapped dial. The sun hadn't even fully risen, but the buzz in my chest said, sleep was out of the question. Anyway, Marshall picked up after 2 rings, his voice already sharp. Man didn't waste time, even at 6:30. "I'm in," I said. "Good," he replied. "You bring the brains, I'll bring the bricks." And that was it. No drawn-out contracts, no bloated investor meetings or pages of bloated vision statements, just 2 men who knew what the other could deliver. By noon, we'd hashed out the terms. Marshall would front the capital, equipment leases, payroll, insurance, and I'd retain majority ownership, creative, and operational control. Brandt Build Construction wasn't just a name anymore. It was real, breathing, dangerous. I leased a double-wide trailer on a patch of gravel lot that once housed temporary school buildings after a fire. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, a flickering fluorescent light, and a creaky HVAC unit that groaned louder than a backhoe in winter, but it was ours. I bought folding tables from a liquidation sale, used office chairs from a closing print shop, and a coffee machine that had clearly seen war, but still brewed strong. On the first day, I walked in and taped our name to the front window. Brandt built black block letters, no flair, just solid. Rebecca was the first to show up. She brought a thermos of coffee and a battered laptop already loaded with permit templates and cruise schedules. "Nothing's connected to Wi-Fi yet," I warned. She sat down anyway. "Doesn't matter. I've got enough in here to launch the shuttle." 2 hours later, Miguel pulled up in his truck. Ray and Nico in tow. They didn't say much when they walked in, just nodded and started pulling out their boots and gloves. I handed Miguel a stack of blueprints for the Auburn Gateway project. He flipped through them like they were blueprints to a kingdom timeline. "Groundbreaking in 6 days," I said. "Site prep starts tomorrow." I already pulled temp permits through Marshall's guys. "We get this right. We make noise." He gave a low whistle. "$1 million office park out the gate. It's what we've earned. No more waiting for someone else's green light." By the end of the week, Tanya was back, too. She pulled into the lot in her old Ford, the bumper still zip-tied from the last snowstorm. She climbed out and tossed me a roll of drawings before I even said hello. "Mechanical plans," she said. "Spend all night reworking the HVAC routing." Shelby's version would have failed city code in 4 places. "You're not even on payroll yet," I said. She shrugged. "Thought I'd start early." It was like the bones of a company started materializing out of dust. We didn't have uniforms, just matching hard hats I bought in bulk. We didn't have a logo, so Miguel's wife painted our name on a plywood sign out front. We didn't have a website, but Rebecca built a Google Drive folder called Stuff That Matters and started tracking every permit, every schedule, every invoice by hand. We were raw, bare, but we moved like a seasoned unit because we'd done this before under someone else's name. Someone else's control. And now we were building the thing we always thought construction should be: honest, skilled, dependable, without the politics, without the nepotism, without Franklin and Shelby hovering over our shoulders with clueless checklists and fake smiles. 3 days before we were due to break ground on Auburn Gateway, I got a call from Royce. "Hey," he said. "Just so you know, Cars has already tried to bid on this project again." "They lost it," I said, pacing the length of our tiny trailer office. "They're desperate. Shelby tried to undercut the timeline. Said he'd do it in 6 weeks." Marshall laughed and hung up. That made me smile. "Good." Royce continued. "I ran your numbers. With Marshall's backing, the first month's payroll and overhead are fully covered. But after that, we need the first milestone payment or we'll have to tap reserves. I'll make sure we hit that first slab deadline early. I said, Marshall's not paying us to wait. After I hung up, I stepped outside. The air was sharp, the kind that reminded you how exposed you were when you didn't have a net. Our lot was still just gravel and weeds, but I could already see what it was going to become. I saw steel, glass, movement. I saw our name, my name on cranes, on signage, on crew jackets. Later that evening, I went home to Isla. The house felt different now. Not tense, just quieter. She was at the table grading papers, a glass of tea beside her. She looked up when I walked in. Not surprised. Just calm. They filed, she asked. Yeah. She nodded once, then turned the page in her binder. You okay? I am. She closed the binder slowly, rested her hand on top. I know what it cost you, Lucas. All those years. All that quiet. I sat across from her, the old chair creaking under me. It wasn't wasted, I said. It just took me a while to stop waiting for permission. She reached out, touched my hand lightly. So what now? Now. I smiled. Now we pour the next slab. There were more jobs ahead, more teams to train, more young builders who would never know the Carwex hierarchy. Only the standard brand built set. A standard built not on titles or bloodlines, but on action, on concrete truths. Truth like this. If you build with integrity, people will follow you. Even when you start with nothing. Truth like this, legacies aren't inherited, they're earned. In truth like this, when you finally stop waiting to be seen, the world has no choice but to look. Steel stretched into the sky like ambition finally given form. I walked the perimeter of our newest mixed-use development site. Boots coated with dust, clipboard under one arm, and a kind of quiet in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not the tense, hold your breath kind. The other kind, the deep exhale, the earned one. We were months into the project and brand build had moved past the new kid phase. We weren't just a fresh name anymore. We were a name people trusted. Contractors called us first. Clients didn't second guess us our numbers. City officials knew our paperwork would be clean before we even filed it. That kind of reputation takes time unless you've already paid for it with years of someone else's name stamped over your work. Miguel waved from across the lot. Clipboard in one hand and radio clip to his vest. I gave him a nod. Tanya was already reviewing the new concrete mix delivery. Rebecca had just confirmed another contract in Southridge. Royce had finalized payroll before the deadline without me even checking in, and not a single one of them needed permission to do what they did best. That was the whole point. Build the right structure, and you didn't need to micromanage it. I walked through the site slowly, running my hand along a fresh beam as I passed. It felt solid, clean, real, the kind of work you knew would outlive you. Rebecca caught up to me near the staging zone, tablet in hand. Tenant rep just called. They want to increase the first floor ceiling height. Said they're fine with a change order if we can adjust by next week. We can, I said, but I want Tanya to confirm we're not compromising anything upstream. She's already on it, Rebecca replied, tapping something into her screen. Of course she is. Rebecca smiled. It's almost too smooth, you know, like we're missing the chaos. Chaos was the old way, I said. This is just what happens when everyone's in the right seat. She hesitated, then pulled something out of her bag. A small silver nameplate. What's that? I asked. Found it in an old Carwex box I brought over months ago. Meant to show you. She handed it to me. It read Lucas Brandt, Field Liaison. I stared at it for a moment. That title, that box, that era. Burn it, I said. She laughed, already planned on it. I slipped the plate into my pocket anyway. Not because I missed it. But because sometimes a reminder of what you were called makes what you've become feel even heavier in your hand. After she left, I stood alone for a while, watching as our structure began to resemble the renderings on the wall of our trailer. He just never imagined one of those places would be away from his company, his legacy, his idea of who I was. I didn't leave to get even. I left to get clear, to stop measuring my worth against the frame someone else forced around me. And now I had my own frame, my own blueprint, my own name on the permit. I walked back to the trailer, opened the door, and sat at the desk that still smelled faintly of paint in progress. On the wall behind me, our logo, rough at first, now refined, hung in bold lettering, Brand Build Construction. I looked at it for a long time, then reached for the small wooden sign I'd carved myself after we landed our first job. On the back, I'd etched 4 simple words. Earned, not inherited, always. I smiled. Because this wasn't just a company. It was a standard. And I would never hand it to anyone who hadn't bled for it the hard way.